So I met Harriet Ball in the summer of 1992 in Houston. And we were at a luncheon for Teach for America. Mike and I had joined Teach for America, and they were at sort of like a motivational luncheon. And Harriet's principal had come and spoken about Harriet. And Harriet was there at the end, sort of meet and greet type thing, and I met her. And I didn't have a job. So in sort of an ironic twist, I was like one of the 3 last people hired from our core year. And I was hired the Thursday before school started on a Monday. And so had the weekend to set up the room. It was something, I'll tell you that. First year, and I struggled. The first 3 days were great. I had 16 sixth graders. I was like really, really good. And then on day 4, they merged the 6th grade classes, and I ended up with 32 sixth graders who were they didn't tell me that they were sort of rival gangs, basically. And I sat them like I was trained in like a U, but I just took the kids I had and put them on one side and the other. It was a mess. And so my first 3 months were awful. And I had some like district assigned mentor who came in about the second month and told me, now this is like 20 some odd years ago, told me I should look for a different job. She did give me one good piece of advice though. She also said, clean your room, which became a sort of a centerpiece in my career. Because I realized no matter how like chaotic everything was, it's something you can directly control. And it's like the whole Navy SEAL version of like make your bed first thing in the morning. Anyhow, Harriet was teaching down the hall from me. And so for months I was begging her to be my mentor teacher. She's like, no, I don't need any more work. They don't get any pay to be a mentor teacher. They got like $125. She's like, no. And I would go and eat. I was like, okay, can I eat lunch in your room? And she's like, yes, you can eat lunch in my room. And I think she thought I'd get tired of it. And it was like magic. She was teaching 4th grade at the time. But she was like the Pied Piper. Literally, like kids who weren't in her class would be coming in during, like teachers would send their kids to them. And like she had this magical ability to reach the head and the heart. And obviously Harriet's like famous for the songs and the chants and the movement, but there was like when you watched her teach, there was like serious heavy lifting being done by the kids, and I think sometimes she got a little shortchanged by people thinking that's all there was, and it was like this magical interplay between stuff that was really fun that kids loved but they were still learning, and stuff that was really hard but they believed they could do because they were having so much fun. It was like it didn't feel like school, and they were engrossed every minute of the day. And this went on for weeks. I would eat lunch, and finally she was like, okay, I'll mentor you. And she came into my 6th grade class where I was like misery for like the first 3 months. And she taught in 45 minutes what I had failed to teach all year long. In this concept about place value. And I just realized that, I learned so many lessons in not only that moment, but in the lead up to really starting to work with her. And the 2 that I remember, one is it's never the kids, right? Like, again, that sounds obvious now, right? And it's like, almost like a cliche now. But when you're in the midst of this, like when you're in the middle of a teaching and you're getting like, you can't get anyone to listen to you, it's very, very frustrating. And you're 21 years old, right? You get no guidance. Like this isn't a world like today, you hear of high functioning, high performing charters, and there's all this training. You got relay, and first year teachers are like, you got to think of a different time, right? And, I was teaching at the lowest performing elementary school in the city of Houston. And so I was literally I refused to quit, but I wanted to. But I said I have to make it through the end of the year because like you just can't give up on kids, right? So like it's one thing, I don't have to go in for a new class of kids. But then I watched Harriet, and she was having fun, and the kids were having fun, and they were learning. And I was like, this isn't the kids, it's me, right? It's my lack of skill, it's my lack of ability. And the rest of the school, by the way, looked like my class, right? So she was an oasis. But the rest of the school was a mess. And then there was Harriet. And there were one or two others. It's overly simplistic. But, and she took me under the wing. So I learned that we as teachers can always find a way and always engage the head and the heart. And then the other thing I learned, which was so critical to her success, is she always met kids where they were and then built them to the level that they were at. Believe it or not, no one had told me. They were like, you're teaching 6th grade, here are the 6th grade textbooks. No one told me. It seems like, I know, again, I even say it out loud and I'm like, this is crazy. But no one told me that, well, if they don't know 3rd grade material, why don't you start with 3rd grade material? And I was like, oh, like, you know, but you feel like I'm a 6th grade teacher, I gotta get them here. So, and Harriet did that. And then the third thing that I think I learned from Harriet was how to love. Like, I know that sounds weird because, like, you don't think about, like, you think you learn how to love by being loved. And you do, I was blessed, I felt loved. My parents, I felt I had brothers and sisters and, lots of friends. And so it wasn't like I didn't feel loved. But what I realized was that it's a difference between you feeling love and getting others to feel loved who don't always make it easy on teachers. And everybody felt like Harriet loved them for who they were and like genuinely loved them for who they were. And she saw the kids as people first, people, before seeing them as students. And it wasn't like they were her students, they were her kids. And I learned something by that. I learned about bringing folks in. I learned about, being vulnerable to kids. I learned about everything I know about teaching from Harriet. Fast forward another 18 months from then, and I win, Teacher of the Year awards from Houston. And it's different, it's a different time. I learned how to teach. And then we start, Mike Feinberg and I start Kipp in '94. And we asked Harriet to come with us, but she couldn't. She had, her kids were still at home, and Kipp was high risk back then, right? We weren't sure we could guarantee her salary. I mean, it was just very, very stressful. It was easier to do, we were young, single. If it didn't work out, we'd go back and be teachers or go, it was a bigger, much more complicated risk, and she felt like she had to stay. She was really committed to the school. So I won Teacher of the Year, and then I got fired, so we had to move schools. She was very committed to this neighborhood where, she had grew up in a very similar neighborhood, so she didn't want to move so she stayed. And she said, look, she was always our biggest cheerleader. And she sort of asked us for only one thing in return, ever. And she's like, just share everything openly with everybody. She's like, just share. She's like, I don't know why. She's like, for 27 years, nobody wanted to learn. She's like, no one wanted to learn what she had. And she's like, I have no idea, why it was me and Mike who became the people who learned from her, right? It doesn't make a ton of sense that it would have been us. Here we are, sort of like two white Jewish kids from the north in Houston. And, I gave Harriet away at her wedding. She's like, just give everything away. She's like, everything I've taught you, give to others. Open your door. Don't make anyone, And so Mike and I took that to heart. It's why Kipp has an open door policy. It's, people show up every day unannounced, right? That doesn't mean we meet with them, but anyone can come into any of our schools at any point in time and see what we do, even to this day, right? At any place. It's why, we try to share everything we can. It's why we try to learn as much as we can from others. But there is no Kipp without Harriet, and truthfully, my career would never have made it. But even the person I've become, the teacher I became, the person I've become, the husband, the dad, I believe I learned more from Harriet than anyone else. It was maybe 96, 95, 96. It was our first or second year in the Bronx. I think it was our second. Oh, it was our second year because I know what building we were in. It was our second year in the Bronx when I met Daisha Toll and Norman Atkins. And Daisha was starting up with Doug McCurry. They were starting up Amistad Academy up in New Haven. Norman, Jamie, and others were starting North Star in Newark, and they came to visit. And we had a very shared goals around what we were trying to do, and we were very, the idea in orchestra about A-string convergence, like if you pluck an A string, all the other A strings vibrate, and it's how you tune an orchestra. Well, we were like A-string convergence, right? We vibrated to the same mission through different organizations, but we always felt very, very committed to each other. And when people talk about the relationship between the three of us, they're like, well, why was there no competition? Well, how did you guys always make it work? And I mean, part of that, I think, obviously there was Harriet, sort of always share everything, mantra, but it was also, we all viewed ourselves as teaching the same kids. We ultimately viewed ourselves as brothers and sisters in the same mission. And then there's a fourth person who I think also deserves a lot of credit, who doesn't get mentioned always in the same breath, but that's David Saltzman, who was the executive director of Robin Hood. And in lots of communities, the competition between organizations is often fostered sometimes externally, where you gotta sort of, the number one question we used to get asked in the beginning, well, what's the difference between Kipp and Uncommon, or Kipp and Achievement First? And so you're forced to answer that. And if you say, well, there is no difference, well, then why, and which organization's better? And then we would all three, we didn't ever talked about it, but we were given the same answers. None's better, right? Like we're all on the same mission, right? We're all doing the same things. And sometimes one organization has higher results, sometimes the other, and like different things are working in different places and we're learning from each other. But David Saltzman, right, from Robin Hood, we never had to compete for Robin Hood's philanthropy. We never had to compete for Robin Hood attention. And not only that, at every juncture, he was there bringing us together for various projects. So when we decided we wanted to start the Relay Graduate School for Education, back then known as Teacher U, Saltzman was the convener. We met in Robin Hood's office. David was always the one who said, oh, it'd be so good for you guys to do this together. And so we were really blessed. And then, after 20 years of doing that together, it's natural to have developed the type of professional and personal relationships that we all did, because we felt very kindred spirits and never viewed it that we had to compete. After 20 years of doing that, it's natural that we sort of felt like kindred spirits. And even within there, like I think about like Daisha coming to New York City 2004, 5, sometime in there. And Joel Klein, who had become chancellor, one of his first things he did was he helped Kipp start to grow. He opened up an old district office building in Harlem. It was the first time they'd given administrative space to be used by kids, and it was like, empty. The building was virtually empty, and Joel really had the political will to make that happen. And he also sent out a call to others, come to New York. We want to make New York the absolute best place for the growth of high-performing charters in the country. And between Joel and Mayor Bloomberg, they were very, very committed to this idea. And so they asked lots of folks to grow here. They asked Uncommon to grow here, and they asked Achievement First to grow here. And Daisha, being the incredible partner that she is, she calls Norman and I to say, hey, do you guys have any, is there any, you cool? If I grow in New York? And it it was like one of those things, like it was nice to ask, like, but we were like, of course, like there's so many kids, like there are 1.1 million, I think that's the thing that gets lost in this whole discussion, right? There are 1.1 million, kids in the New York City public schools. There's, 13 million low-income kids in this country, right? And like, there is so many kids who have such great need. And it makes no sense to me when folks who are doing the same work compete. And that's true of not only like public charter schools, but that's also true of traditional public schools. Like, we are all in this together. And when the story is written, those who try to divide us, what's going to be said is only that they stood in the way of kids getting a better education, right? They're not going to say, well, this organization was better or that. No, they're going to say all of these kids were left out because the adults couldn't get their act together. And that's the way I see it. I mean, it goes back to what I learned. It's never the kids. It is on us. So when Norman, Daisha, and I got together and we started talking about putting together a graduate school of education, which is now known as Relay. I mean, it was not the easiest thing to come up with a name, right? Like Kipp, that came. By the way, I'll tell you an example. Kipp, this goes in the first part. Like, Kipp is a derivative of Harriet's song. Right? The name Kipp, knowledge is power, comes from Harriet, one of Harriet's most famous songs, right? You got to read, baby, read. The more you read, the more you know. Knowledge is power, power is freedom, and I want it. And so, like, when Mike and I were trying to come up with a name for the program, we were going through, and all of a sudden, it was knowledge is power program, Kipp. And like, it was sort of like light bulbs. And when you hear Norman talk about uncommon schools, it was a light bulb moment, right? When you hear Daisha talk about achievement first, right? These were all, like, it was simpler. The name for the graduate school, there were lots of iterations to this. And I'd go home and I was recently married. We've still been engaged, but we right around that. And my wife runs a marketing, events, crisis communication company. And so, we were coming up with, she was bouncing around names, and she's like, ended up playing on the word teacher you. And so originally it was going to be like YOU, and then it became teacher you with the U. And so, yeah, my wife was the brainchild behind the name, which and then we were like, it's a light bulb. We love the name, right? It was great. And it sort of encompassed sort of our, the blend of like teacher expertise and a lot of online stuff, which the program has. So the funny thing about the name was we couldn't keep the name. We became an accredited institution. And we could no longer keep the name Teacher U because the state told us in order to be a U, right, which was short for university, although we didn't use it, it was just U, it was a letter, but they said it implied a university. You have to have a brick and mortar library and a tenure track. Now you can't make that up, right? Like a brick and mortar library and a tenure track. And then thank God that Norman was calmer than me because, I'm a huge fan of Prince. And I thought we should become like a symbol and be the organization formerly known as Teacher U. Just like when Prince protested the record labels. Norman did not think that would help our accreditation efforts, which he was right. And so we became the Relay Graduate School of Education, great teachers passing the baton to other great teachers. And one of the reasons I love that so much is, to me, in my heart, that sort of evoked Harriet, right? Because she was the original teacher of this movement. And she passed the baton, and then the baton kept getting passed. And so I think it is a very fitting tribute to Harriet.